Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most complex and, honestly, one of the most personal questions in modern science. What causes autism? For decades, researchers have been piecing together this giant puzzle, and it has profound implications for millions of families. And this right here is really the heart of the matter. Beyond all the data and the lab work, this is a deeply human question. It's the why that fuels this entire scientific investigation. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, so first things first, let's make sure we're on the same page. When we talk about autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, we're talking about a condition that's defined by a person's behavior. But, and this is absolutely critical, the science is crystal clear. Its roots are biological, found deep in the way the brain develops. So where do those biological roots begin? Well, the first, most powerful clue in this whole investigation points overwhelmingly toward our genes. Now check this out. This slide shows some of the most powerful evidence we have, and it comes from studying twins. We're looking at something called concordance, which is just a fancy way of saying, if one twin has autism, what's the chance the other one does too? For identical twins, who share nearly all their DNA, that chance shoots up to as high as 90%. For fraternal twins, it's way, way lower. This was a massive clue that genes are playing a leading role here. But, and this is a huge but, if this whole story was purely genetic, that number for identical twins would be 100%. And it's not. That gap, that 10% difference, was a huge turning point in the research. It opened up an entirely new mystery for scientists to solve. And this is where it gets even more complex. When scientists try to hunt down the exact genes responsible, all the specific high-risk genes they found so far, they only account for about 8% of all cases. This just reinforces that gap we saw with the twins. So the crucial point is, yeah, genetics is a huge part of the story, but it's not the whole story. Something else has to be going on. This realization basically changed everything. It was a light bulb moment that told researchers they had to start looking outside of our DNA for factors in the environment that might team up with a person's genetic makeup. So that's exactly what they did. Scientists started looking at the very earliest stages of development, zeroing in on those 9 months before a child is even born. They started investigating the prenatal environment. And pretty quickly, a few really clear proof-of-concept cases popped up. Things like thalidomide, a sedative from the 50s, or valproic acid, an anti-seizure medication. And what researchers found was fascinating. It wasn't just exposure at any time, but during a very specific, very narrow window in the first trimester. We're talking just weeks after conception, that showed a clear link to a higher risk of autism. These specific examples were total game changers. I mean, for the first time, scientists had direct evidence that non-genetic, environmental factors, like a medication a mother took or an infection she got, could actually contribute to the biological path that leads to autism. And all of this leads to a pretty definitive conclusion from the research community. By the time a child is born, the train has already left the station. The biological foundations for autism are set up long before a child's first birthday, all during fetal development. But wait, what about factors after birth? One theory in particular became so huge that it sparked this massive, global scientific investigation. It actually took researchers on a major, but as you'll see, a totally necessary detour. So the claim, which first popped up in the late 1990s, was that the MMR vaccine could cause autism. Now, this was a serious charge, and the scientific community took it very, very seriously. They launched dozens of huge studies all over the world to figure out if it was true. Okay, so let's just look at the data from one really powerful natural experiment in Japan. You can see on the slide that in the early 90s, they completely stopped using the MMR vaccine. Now think about it. If the vaccine was a major cause of autism, you'd expect the number of new cases to flatten out or maybe even drop, right? But the exact opposite happened. The rate of autism actually rose dramatically after they stopped the vaccine. This was a huge piece of evidence against that link. And then you have this massive study from Denmark. They followed over 500,000 kids. They compared the rates of autism in children who got the MMR vaccine to those who didn't. And the result? Absolutely no difference, none. And the evidence just kept piling up. Studies in the UK, in California, they even looked at the vaccine preservative thimerosal and found nothing. The data just poured in from country after country, all using different methods, and every single one pointed to the exact same conclusion. So, after one of the most thorough investigations in the history of modern medicine, the hypothesis was definitively ruled out. This wasn't just about debunking a myth. It was really a testament to the scientific method. The global scientific and medical consensus is unambiguous. Vaccines do not cause autism. The scientific case is closed. Okay, so with the vaccine question settled, where does the investigation go from here? Well, the focus is now right back where we left it, on that complex dance between our genes and the prenatal environment. And the scale of this new challenge is, well, it's enormous. Researchers like to use this iceberg analogy. We know the developing brain is incredibly vulnerable, yet we're surrounded by thousands of synthetic chemicals. And the vast majority, we're talking over 80%, have never even been tested to see what they do to a developing brain. Think about that for a second. So how in the world do you tackle an iceberg? Well, researchers have a pretty clear three-part game plan. Step 1 is toxicology. Start screening the thousands of chemicals we're exposed to every day. Step 2 is neurobiology. Get into the lab and figure out exactly how these chemicals might be interacting with our genes to change the brain. And step 3 is epidemiology. Launch these massive long-term studies that follow kids from the womb all the way into adulthood, connecting the dots between their real-world exposures and their health outcomes. Which leaves us with this final, really important thought. This whole investigation isn't just some academic exercise to find a single cause. It's about understanding the incredibly delicate process of brain development. It's about finding preventable risk factors. And ultimately, it's about paving the way for a future where we can better support the healthy development of every single child.